My friend, Mark Austin Thomas in Los Angeles. Last time we talked a little bit about how long you had been retired. Now, how long had that been?
Oh, wow. Well, it's been a year and a half now. I don't know how
Yeah,
long it was when
yeah.
we
No,
had that
that's
conversation.
okay. Year and a half is what I was looking for. I am officially retired as of today.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. I sent the
Okay.
company notice, not notice, but I sent them the resignation letter yesterday. I have nothing but nothing but warm feelings for Cumulus in the last 11 plus years I've worked here in Dallas. But I just thought I'd share that with you because we have talked a little bit about, you know, life without radio, and now I'm here and
Post radio.
looking forward to it. But let's go ahead and talk about radio a little bit because it has changed so much since you and I both got into it. Start me out again, if you would, with a little bit of your resume. Go back to the beginning. How'd you get into the business and why?
Okay, I'll try and give a quick summation. I got a degree the College of Communications at the University of Illinois on radio and television. My first job was as a reporter at WIVK in Knoxville, Tennessee. That was from, well, I have to do the years. So I did that. And then I left there after about 4.5 years. I started out as a reporter and ended up as news director. And then went to CBS in Boston, was an O&O at the time, WEEI. It's now All Sports. And then was there for a year and then came to California, got a job as a news director at KSOL in the Bay Area. And I was there for about
What what
five.
what took you to California?
Oh, that's the story I'll have to tell you on another. Like that's
Okay.
that's almost like a whole little thing in of itself.
All
But
right.
long story short, I just got an itch, like I need to go to California. I need to go to California. Funny thing was I was back in Champaign-Urbana after I left Boston. I went and stayed at a friend's apartment. He was living with his girlfriend, so I had a rent-free apartment for the summer. And I didn't really know what I was going to do. And I wanted to go to California, but I could not get anybody to employ me because everybody would look at my resume and say, well, you were just at CBS in Boston. I don't think you want to flip burgers at, low high burger shop, and I
Right.
go, I
Yeah.
do. I really want to do this. But it took me the whole summer before I realized I should have just lied about I should have not made it look like the last thing I did was that, or I don't know. I shouldn't have been so honest. Anyway, no one wanted to hire me. And so this is part of the story. I won't go into all of it
It's all
about
right.
that summer, but uh, at that time, I don't know if you remember the movie My Dinner with Andre.
I remember the title. I don't know that I
Okay.
saw it, but at
Okay.
my age, what happens is Carol Ann and I are always talking about, have we seen this movie? She said, I think we did. I said, oh, okay, I'll find something else. She said, no, that's okay. I don't remember it. Heck, I don't even remember if we saw it. So, but I think we liked it. So go ahead. My
Well,
dinner with Andre.
it was just basically just a conversation between Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory.
Yeah.
And in the scene, the point, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because in the movie, there's a scene where Wallace Shawn is talking about fortune cookies, and I don't see how people can know your fortunes in the back kitchen of these restaurants. How can they put those fortunes in the cookie? And there's a whole big thing about how fortune cookies are, like what's that about? And a friend of mine who at the time was a sales rep for Random House, she had lived in California for a while before she came back to Illinois. And I was telling her, I can't get a job. No one's hiring me. I don't know what's going on. I can't lay carpet. I can't flip burgers. I can't get a job. This is so weird. And we were talking about it. And then a week later, I get a card from her and I open it up and there's a check. And this is like in the 70s. Okay. It's a check for $700 and just the words go to California.
Really?
And my entire life, which includes two children, since then came out of that check because I
Wow.
wouldn't have had the money to drive there. I wouldn't have had anything. I wouldn't have any way of getting there. And I mean, it's such a blessing that she gave me. So based on that, that's how I came to California. Um, got this job being news director in the Bay Area, did that for about 4.5, 5 years. Then they decided they didn't want to do news anymore. They wanted to do more hits, talk about changing radio. And so I came to Southern California and started out as a per diem news writer at KNX, Morning Drive. Then was doing that. So I would do that from like 3 in the morning until 10 or something, go sleep in my car for 2 hours in the parking lot, and then drive to KFI and do an afternoon editing shift there.
Yeah.
And I did that for a few months, and then I got hired at KFI to be a board op and an editor, and then transitioned into I went back and did a little stint as a reporter for KNX, but then KFI hired me to be a reporter, and then on and on and on. And then news director, assistant program director, then left KFI, and then became program director at KLAC. I mean, not KLAC. Yeah, KLAC, when we changed from adult standards to talk for like 2 years. Did that. Then they decided we don't want to do this format, fired everybody. And then I was out of work for about 2-3 months. And then I became the new midday anchor for KPCC, public radio, and enjoyed that. Did that for about 2 years. Then got an offer to be the co-host of Marketplace Morning Report. Did that for a year. Then drift around a bit again. I did some fill-in anchor work for KNX. Then got hired to be the news director and assistant program director at KBC when David Hall was there, and then left there because they fired a bunch of people, and I was one of them. And then I couldn't find a job for 5 months, and this is when our paths crossed sort of again. Yeah. So I came to work for Merlin, although in New York, not Chicago, and did that until they folded those stations.
Well, you and I worked together at KNX.
We worked at KNX. Yeah.
I
got to mention that. So Merlin fired everybody at their stations, and so I left. I was going to stay because I had gotten a job at WINS as an anchor, but my daughter at that time was 11. I had missed her 12th birthday, and I just said, "Okay, this is it. I'm gonna just come back because I can't be apart from her." Yeah. And don't you know that the day I went in and told the program director, after I told my daughter, "Okay, I'm coming back," she's very excited. And I go in the next day and I tell the program director, the news director at WINS, I have to go. And he's like, "Well, I understand." And of course, family is very important. Interestingly, a job has come up that I was gonna, wanted you to know about, and I could have just like killed myself because I would have stayed. I mean, it wouldn't have taken anything if he had said, "We've got a job as a hot dog vendor that you could do until something comes." I would have done that because I really wanted to stay. I was living in Brooklyn, working in Manhattan, but I had already made this promise, and so I had to come back, and so I came back.
I know you loved New York. I remember that.
I did.
That period when you were with Merlin. Do you ever feel that some of it is just preordained, or it's just, this is the best thing for you? You need to go. You don't want to go, but you need to do this. And certainly, certainly your daughter made that point clear. But have you ever felt that your career was being manipulated or managed in greater capacity?
Only when I look back on it, but not I was going through it. I mean, the job that I got in Knoxville, my girlfriend and I were both attending U of I, and we had this agreement, like whoever got a job first, that's where we're going to go.
Yeah.
And I got a job at the classical station on campus, but it turned out earlier that day, she had been offered a job in Tennessee. And so I said, "Okay, that's we're good now." I could have said, "I'm not moving to Tennessee," but that was the agreement. So I went, and I had a great experience living there. Love Knoxville. And so, but that's not something I would have decided to do. So I don't know about fated, but I have found, at least in my life, that there are times when something looks like, I don't know how this could ever work, sometimes works the best of all. And so that's gotten me to just trust things a little more than I would have.
Yeah. How were you attracted to news, or were you?
Yeah, I was. How was I attracted to news? Uh, I think, well, I'm kind of nosy, so that kind of helps. I mean, I want to know things, and I was always reading the news, listening to the news. I mean, in the 70s, so much was going on, and that to me, that was one of those periods of time where if you had any interest in news, there was so much to absorb yourself in. I guess that's true of any time, but it seemed that way to me at that time, being a college student. Um, and my fifth grade teacher, I was bagging groceries at a grocery store when I was living in Chicago in high school. And my fifth grade teacher, who didn't seem to like me very much when I was in fifth grade, at least I thought, came to the store and she brought a book and gave it to me. She said, "This is all about journalism." She said, "You like to write," because I used to write stories a lot. And she said, "I think this is something you should think about." And I was so touched that she even remembered me and thought enough to bring a book to give me, that
Yeah.
actually started me very early on thinking about maybe I should try journalism. And then it was more of an idea towards print. But I always loved radio, and once I put the two together and thought, well, maybe I could do radio. Although I have to say, in college, one of the things they had us do was go cover a city council meeting. University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, which is southern Illinois, is basically a university set in a very agricultural community. I mean, cornfields everywhere. And the city council meetings were largely about, agricultural things, which I knew nothing about and didn't care at all. And so I thought, oh my God, if I go to a city council meeting, is this what I'm going to be covering all the time? And then I realized, well, if you are, if you're working as a reporter in an agricultural community, yes. But if you're working as a reporter someplace else, no. And so then I was much more interested.
Have you paid any attention to radio at all since you retired? Are
Um,
you a listener, or just occasionally you'd stumble across it, or what?
Not very much, and I've recently felt bad about that. I've made a determination to start listening, not just to radio, but television too. I'm paying attention to television news. I couldn't tell you who the anchors are or anything like that. I think it was probably just burnout. I
Yeah,
didn't consciously think that, but I
yeah,
was just like,
yeah.
I mean, I get the news. I still get the news, but I get it on my phone and, different other ways. But just like in the past month or so, I've like made a determination. I don't need to get back into it as much as I was, but I want to know, what's KNX doing, what's KFI doing, what's Channel 7, Channel 5. Like I just want to be more knowledgeable about what's happening, what outlets are doing in terms of news in particular.
So, given the technological age that we're in and the evolution of the industry, I should say, both industries, radio and journalism, where do you think it's all going?
Well, of course, nobody knows the answer for sure, but I like to look at a few things and see what they might portend for the future. One is that I remember with the O.J. Simpson case, that this is the first time I was aware of it, where the boundaries that separated sports, entertainment, crime, politics, all seemed to come together. And I noticed that when I saw TV trucks from all these different, Entertainment Tonight, ESPN, all these people covering OJ. And I thought, wow, this is like a story that just seems to hit all the bases. And to me, that's when I started noticing more and more, like, you know, um, business news is the news. Like it isn't just its own separate category. Sports isn't just sports. It
Right.
flows across everything. And so the merging of all of these things, and particularly when you're trying to get clicks on various platforms, I think appeal the more you can appeal to people across a lot of different um, boundaries, I think that's more appealing to people. So I don't know about journalism, big J, as we've known it up to now. because it kind of seems like with the smushing together of all these things, which, there's some good things about that, but I think there's some bad things about that. There's distinctions that I don't think people get that are important. The other thing that I'm noticing is that because we're in such a hyper partisan world, and because it's so difficult because of AI, but even before AI just sort of, I don't know, just sort of exponentially makes this more difficult. But the idea of what's true, what's really happening, what do we know? Can we trust this? I don't know how many times I've posted something that I've seen on Facebook because I accepted it at face value. And then people later say, that's not really that picture, or that's not really this.
Right.
And maybe they're right, but it's fatiguing for me to have to think about it like that.
Yeah.
So I think that because there's a feeling that I can't always trust what's there, I think there's more of a need, and certainly a hunger, for the presentation of information without or with a very, very little spin.
Yeah.
With people or entities or companies or groups that don't have a dog in the fight, except to say, look, this is the information we've gathered from our sources. We're putting it out for you to look at. You decide what you want to believe. And I think that would engender a lot of trust. And I think if something like that were done, or if it's being done now, if it grows, then I think that's going to get a lot of traction, because I think there's a real need for that. And even if we all have biases. So even if you favor this particular outlet or this particular politics, I think people are wanting to actually hear what other sides of the story are. I really, what do other people have to say about this issue? So that they can better make up their minds. Isn't that the idea all along? To give people the most information so they can make the best decision.
Well, I certainly agree with everything you just said. But going back to how AI is going to make and is making things exponentially more difficult, artificial intelligence can take this video and turn it into things that we never said, but it'll look exactly like us. It'll sound exactly like us. If you're a political candidate, stand by, because it's about to change your life. But what I really wonder about, Mark, is, I don't expect you have an answer to this either, but this is our perspective, because this is our experience. This is in our experience anyway. Hoping or wishing we could go back to a time when you found reporters and other journalists that you could trust and believe, just laying out the facts, and that's the way it is, and you decide what to think about it. But I wonder if younger people today, people in their teens and slightly older, are going to care about that, because the world is going to be so different. It's going to be something that you and I perhaps can't conceptualize. And personally, I've gotten to a point where I don't know. I've just kind of given up trying to figure it out.
I don't know. It's a good question. And since I'm not 20, there's no way I have that perspective. However, I have a daughter that's 23, and I kind of watch how she sees the world. She's very cynical. I shouldn't say very cynical. She's cynical, which I think is good, particularly when you're young. I think it's good not to just, like I did, I think, just absorb everything and take everything in as it's presented. But I think her cynicism, and I also teach at a junior college, and so I regularly in touch with students that are in their early 20s or late teens. And I think that their attitude is very much, again, different from mine when I was that age, but they're less trusting, and I can think that's a good thing. And so I guess what I'm saying is, even though they don't know the world we knew, so they can't bemoan the way things are now because there's no context, I think they still can tell that nobody knows what to believe. And I don't think you need a context for that to be an unattractive situation.
Yeah, good
so I
point.
think if there are organizations, if there are people who are committed to putting out information, just putting out information. I mean, we can kind of explain it to you, give you some context, so it's not just there. But the context has nothing to do with what I think is right or, I mean, certain amount of bias is baked into everything, but not so overtly. I think that would be a product that increasingly over time people would really want, because everyone has just become so cynical. Everything has become so transactional that I think that the idea of information that you can trust and that you can believe in and that hasn't been spun in a particular way, I think would be attractive to a younger audience. I think it'd be attractive to everybody.
We're perhaps at a point where we're ready to start thinking, start learning, start listening and paying attention and looking for answers ourselves instead of just accepting what's being handed down.
Yeah, maybe. I hope I hope so. I was also thinking though, as you were saying that, that may be true for those few things that they're very concerned about, that
Yeah.
they have a dog in the fight. For the other things, it may just be, I'm not going to even vote on those things because I don't know
Yeah.
anything about it. And I guess you could argue both sides of the pros and cons of that. Like, you should know more, and then you can, vote on these other things. I mean, I run into that whenever there are judges on the ballot. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know who these people are, and
Right.
I like that name. I don't like that
Yeah.
name.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't have the time to do the kind of research, and I'm not one to feel comfortable just accepting what a newspaper, whatever it is, recommends.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I guess I just won't vote for that.
Yeah. Exactly right. Well, I don't know where it's going. What about the entertainment aspect of radio as we've known it? Music, funny disc jockeys, entertaining people that we consider, to be somebody we can relate to and that kind of thing. Is there a future for that, whether it's over the air or in some other platform?
I think it's some other platform, because I think, I mean, people like to be entertained, and they may like and love music, but I think there's value in personalities that are attached to that. I don't see how you get away from that. But the format, the platform that it's on, I think changes. I mean, you're already here, radio stations, for example, dropping the word radio
Right.
from their title, which, feels a little, I don't know. I was like, wow, really? But I understand. I understand why they're doing
Yeah.
that. They don't want people to associate with this antique box that has a knob and an antenna and all,
Right.
it's just so, you know,
Well, some of it just makes sense. How many years ago did radio stations stop using the call letters and give
right,
themselves a name? You
right.
know,
The
that
dial
makes
position.
sense. What's the point of the letters? The letters mean nothing until you identify what that's all
And
about.
why do you say 106.7? Because you're not dialing to that
Right.
anyway. That
Right.
doesn't really mean anything. But I think that personality driven entertainment will continue. It'll just change. And it probably is right now. And I'm just not aware of what that's looking like. And I don't just mean satellite radio, although obviously that's one thing. But to me, once people were able to get into, because I do this, once you're able to get into your car and hook up my phone, and I make playlists all the time because I'm a music junkie. So I've
Mm.
got like lots of playlists, all kinds of music and artists and whatever. So I have more music that I want to hear at my fingertips than any radio station could ever give me.
Sure.
Just like I have more films because I'm really into movies than I could probably get at a typical what used to be a video store. So the minute I could get in my car and listen to what I want, um, and not commercials, to me that form of radio is pretty much dead or dying.
Well, yeah, the commercial aspect and the fact that you're able to choose your own music.
Yeah,
But again, goes back to the loss of that personal connection.
right.
That human connection is missing now, by and
Yeah,
large, because for so many years, you've got entire generations who have learned to hear disc jockeys simply reading liners, reading
right.
promotional notes, and offering nothing, right?
And we had kids who started listening to radio in that kind of format, that kind of programming from a very early age. Now they're not.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, my youngest daughter, 23, is not that young, but for the purposes of this conversation, but she never grew up listening to radio. So she has no history. She hasn't been modeled. That way of getting entertainment hasn't been modeled to her. So she doesn't
Yeah.
really, she never like thought, like if I said, who's the morning drive announcer on Kiss FM, she couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
so already that's a generation that doesn't even have the experiences that you and I just took for granted, you know, and not to mention calling in the radio station, making a dedication. I remember doing that. Nobody
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. Well, I tend to look at that as because the industry has forgotten how to make that important or to be able to provide it in
Right.
such a way that it's fun.
Let
What?
me ask you a question real quick. Do
Yeah.
you think the Telecommunications Act of '96 had a big hand in squashing that because it meant companies could buy up everything, and then
Oh
you
yeah.
started getting voice tracking and homogenization of
Oh yeah. Yeah. Program directors are now running 4 radio stations instead of just one. They're not concentrating on the people they hired because they didn't hire any of these people. Maybe they're not even in the same city, and certainly you've got the whole corporation being owned by investors
Right.
who don't even know anything about the business and couldn't care less. They've just got, they've got a portfolio that was put together by some investment company. So I mean, yeah, everything has changed drastically, and we could sit here and moan about it, but I've got one other thing for you, and that is because of your experience in news, radio, news director, and so forth. I started to ask you, what are you hearing now that you like and don't like, but apparently you're not listening to radio.
I can't really say.
So, so were there any trends that were bothersome for you in terms of the way news was being reported?
Yeah. A couple of things. Too much crime, too much crime, too much
Yeah,
crime.
yeah,
I just always felt that was corrosive. Um, I mean, I don't want to be unkind, but most crime does not affect most of the audience.
exactly.
And so it's kind of like when we
It
finally
affects the
got
people in the neighborhood
right.
and the victims and the families involved. But as you said, it's so corrosive. It's like, and plus it's really easy.
Right,
It's
exactly. And when
easy to
that's why
pull
I
that.
was there,
Yeah.
particularly for all news stations, because I mean, I remember when I was a reporter at a non-all news station, and I used to envy all news stations. Because God, they have all this time, they could do all these things. And then I went to work for one and went, you can never do enough things to fill up all this time. It's like, it's like rolling the boulder up the hill. There's always more time. And then, as you know, even if when you supposedly have all the time filled, as an anchor, you find these holes that then you have to figure out a way to fill that. And so, yeah, crime is just an easy thing to do, but I do believe it's corrosive. I think it makes people more fearful of the world they live in unnecessarily, and it doesn't get. It's like empty calories. There's no nutrition. There's no real value. It just takes up space and time. So
Yeah.
I never liked that. I'm glad to see some people getting away from that. Um, I never liked when reporters, and I've seen more of this, inject themselves in the stories
Mm.
unnecessarily. I mean, if something happens, you're on the scene covering something and it impacts you. Sure, you can say that. That's just part of the story. But too much unnecessarily. I never liked that. Still don't like that. I feel like I see that a little more in television. Um, and that just sort of bothers me. Um, I There was a movie, keep referring to movies. And I can't remember the name of it. With it was about Edward R. Murrow, and it had George Clooney and
Oh yeah, yeah. I saw that. I don't remember the
Night
name of
and
it
Blood,
either, but
something like that.
yeah.
The Night and Blood. Anyway, it's based on his sign off. But one of the things that I got from that movie, and it's a movie, okay, so it's not real life, but still, one of the things I got from that is that being a reporter, being a journalist, is a calling. And I like that, not because it elevated the career that I was in, but that was how I felt about it. I felt like bringing people news, bringing people information is almost sacred, in a in a in a non-religious way. the idea of serving people with information that can help them to make good decisions and strengthen democracy. It's like a very, very noble calling. But I felt like there was, and I think there was a time where that was more of a feeling, but that feeling is, to me, long since dissipated. And as a result, I think it has become, very it's just a job. It's just a gig. And I don't think doing the news should ever just be a gig. If I ever was, when I was hiring people, if I ever detected that in someone who was applying for a job, I would never hire them.
I was talking with John Guerin just a little while ago today in Chicago, and we were talking about how things have changed in terms of the on-air staff, and particularly in newsrooms. I've been working in newsrooms for 40 some years. And when I first started out, people would get together and go, "Hey, what are you working on?" "Well, I'll tell you, here's what I've got. Let me take a look at your copy. Let me try to boil this down. Here, why don't you try this? Why don't you think about that?" We were discussing the craft. That completely disappeared.
Mhm.
I can't say, I work with some very good people and some very lovely people in the last 20 years who really don't seem to care at all about the craft or how they go about doing anything. It's just a matter of, filling squares, filling, filling up the the line of items that's passing by here. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but the enthusiasm seems to be gone.
Right. Well, that could be due to a lot of, and I don't want to sound like a whiner. Things are the way they are, and I'm sure that I remember when I got into the business, I heard people bemoaning the way it was when I
Yeah,
stepped
yeah,
into it
yeah,
and
yeah.
thinking, "Yeah, these old farts, what are they talking about?"
Right.
And I'm doing the same thing. But salaries have gone way, way, way down. Benefit packages for people in our bit, like there are a lot of, I mean, there are a lot of other factors in addition to the fact that people just don't have the passion they used to have. You know, it's not valued as much. It's not valued as much by consumers in certain ways. Not their fault. I think it's kind of what we've devolved to, but they don't value it as much. The companies don't value it as much, and then the individual entities that employ them don't value as much. And I'm not going to name any names because I think this is true pretty much across the board. But
Yeah.
I think that also has a corrosive effect over time. You don't feel like your work is valued as much, and so you don't value it as much.
Right.
You tell people what you do, and it used to be when you told people what you do, well, I told people what I did. Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Like you go out and you report the news, or you invest. Like what's happening? But people don't have that kind of interest anymore, and so it's hard to value what you do when you don't think it's valued by others.
Thank you so much. I want to really strongly urge anybody who's watching or listening to this to go back to our first episode some months ago when you and I talked about all kinds of things, and we did get into radio eventually, but much more in terms of your background, your views on social issues and so forth. I just went back and checked that out, and I thought it was really excellent. So thank you again, Mark.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
You're a special guy, and I enjoy being your friend, and I enjoy listening to you talk about your experience. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Have a good day.